Chapter 10, The Knowledge of Evil, Part 2. Practically the whole world knows the Cain and Abel tragedy. Cain took his brother's life, leading to yet another pertinent question. From what master do we learn the story? Well, from the Bible. Wrong. We learn the story directly out of the mouth of our whip-cracking master, Master Knowledge of Good and Evil. As huge a victory as Team Light scored in the first and second chapters of Genesis, Team Darkness has scored a phenomenal victory in the third and fourth chapters of Genesis. First, by conning us into eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, leading us directly into our fatal discovery of conscience, judgment, guilt, religion, and sin. Second, through the telling and retelling of the Cain and Abel story. News at 11. Master Knowledge of Good and Evil teaches the entire primeval human race how to sin. Folks, this is exactly how you take it from your imagination into the real world. Moreover, primeval man is taught how to pass judgment. Imagine how the discovery of the wheel must have gone viral and spread like wildfire. Before the first functioning wheel, no one had really seen a good wheel before, nor what it could do. People started making all sorts of wheels. Likewise, before Cain and Abel, no one had ever seen a really good sin before, nor had anyone ever spoken about a person, a fellow human, in terms of good and evil before. Collective conscience and collective judgment. Our first evil people lesson. There are good people in creation, and there are evil people in creation. This is not God's judgment. This is us assuming God's judgment. God turns to good people. However, God does not turn to evil people. Oh, let's really juice it up. God has respect for good people. However, God has no respect for evil people. Submit it for your approval. The Cain and Abel story. Out of this lesson comes our first worldwide collective judgment held in tow by our master, Master Knowledge of Good and Evil. This is our ABC lesson on good people and evil people. What does Master Knowledge of Good and Evil teach us? Here is the story of two brothers, Cain, an evil fiend, and Abel, a good and righteous man. Organized religion cannot bring itself to see the knowledge of good and evil as a diabolical plague, for if it ever did, it would have no choice but to recognize itself as the diabolical offspring of a diabolical plague. Our Christian pilots and flight crew entirely ignore the danger, barely recognizing the knowledge of good and evil as even being a negative thing. Oh, yeah, it's that tree in the Garden of Eden, the one from which God forbade Adam to eat. The Muslim and Jewish organized religions are no exception to the diabolical plague. Religion and sin is what leads directly to law. The Jewish patriarchs were infected to the gills with the knowledge of good and evil, passing the most fatal aspects of the disease, the law, down to Paul, whom in turn struggled with which was greater, the law or perfect grace, leading directly to, quote, the plane crash, unquote. Well, Paul thought the law and the law won. Verily, verily, the law empowers sin. Truly accepting what's been done for us in the cross pulls the power plug on sin, as in termination with prejudice. Jesus spoke of good and evil only for the sake of the religious leaders consumed by it. Moreover, only from his Father's perspective, life being the good thing and death being the evil thing. The church, as with all organized religion, is oblivious to the ongoing effect of the knowledge of good and evil. The Christian church continually eats it 24/7, duped into seeing it as a positive thing, judging everything in terms of good and evil, especially humanity. Church dogma wallows in it. The church dismisses the disease, the knowledge of good and evil, clearly named in the scriptures, in favor of its own fictitious fabrication. the fall of man and original sin. The God's honest truth: sin is merely a symptom. Our need to rule over other human beings is yet another symptom. The disease itself marches triumphantly on. There is no such thing as evil people. We are all created by the same Father, the same good Father. None of us are any better nor worse than Cain or Abel, for we are all human. Our core self is no better nor worse than whom we call our brother standing with us. Likewise, our core self is no better nor worse than who we call our enemy standing on the other side of the world. The God's honest truth: we are all brothers and sisters, one and the same. We should learn well never to refer to any human being as evil. If a horse could be made to talk and it said, "Those horses over there are evil," well, what does that tell us about a horse? Worse yet, we heard it from the horse's mouth. Our divine perception is not much better than that of a horse. We as human beings are ill-equipped to judge what is truly good and what is truly evil. Yes, we've gained the knowledge that both good and evil exist. However, we lack the proper discernment it takes to know the difference. Humanity asks, who were Cain and Abel? Humanity's master gives us its answer. Cain was an evil fiend who murdered his good brother. This reprehensible answer is an age-old lie told straight out of the mouth of master knowledge of good and evil. It makes no difference from whose human mouth the lie proceeds and grimly proliferates. An atheist ditch digger or a hand-picked apostle of Jesus. It is a lie that comes to us directly from the knowledge of good and evil. Easy to prove that it's a lie. Let's take another step back and get a clear handle on this terrible, evil fiend, Cain. Before committing the act of killing his brother, Cain was a good man, right? No, cries we, the worldwide human consensus of conscience, the jury. He was always evil, through and through. Just look what he offered to God. Hey, collective conscience, chill out for just a second. Let's be sure to get this straight. Are you saying that Cain was always evil because of the type of offering he gave to God? Yes! Seriously. Well, then, certainly Cain must have sacrificed a virgin or an innocent child to God, right? No! Vegetables and fruit from his field. Seriously. Wow, okay. Well, let's make sure we fully understand this. Cain is an evil fiend from the get-go, not because he lied, stole, or murdered, but because of the type of sacrifice he gave to God. And atheists wonder, if God is real, why is God not right here physically in our midst? Well, there's a down-to-earth answer to that question. God used to be. According to the scriptures, our Heavenly Father was on earth, physically with us, walking the ground in our very midst, even after Adam and Eve got put out of the garden. Why no longer? Well, there's an old musician saying, when a fight breaks out, a good band that truly gives a shit stops playing, pulls the plug, and goes home. The devastating result of our first sin is the physical departure of God from the face of the earth. How complicated things have come here on earth ever since we traded in our factory setting for the knowledge of good and evil. Even in the simplicity of Cain and Abel's day, it was not merely Cain that day who was cursed from the face of the ground because of the knowledge of good and evil. Our affliction has nothing to do with original sin or the false judgments that proceed from such a diabolically induced doctrine, such as, the nature of all humanity is evil and debased to the core. Rather, it is our way of thinking in terms of good and evil that hides us from our Father's footsteps and from his face. Think about it. Something so simple and innocent on God's part leads to something so horrific and tragic on our part. God, in our physical midst, showing perhaps his favor, perhaps his disgust regarding one simple, stupid, arbitrary thing, and a good man ends up killing his brother over it. Cain was a good and godly man in every respect, save for being inspired by the darkness that God needs a burnt offering, which led to homicide. Without question, Cain was a man of God. That truth fits faultlessly. Even if the church theory is correct that all parties involved know that God finds more favor in Abel, for if the church theory that God truly favored Abel is correct, it would mean that Cain loved God and desired his approval so much that Cain cannot continue onward, being seen as less good in God's eyes than his brother. Without the knowledge of good and evil in the works, the event never happens in either scenario. Science fair parable number 1. Without the knowledge of good and evil in the works, God could have liked something of Abel's better than Cain's, or vice versa, all day long. And from Cain and Abel's perspective, it would have never led to judging why and homicide. Now, how do we know that for certain? Because Cain would have been acting under his unspoiled factory setting. Under the mindset of it's all good, there's no reason for Cain to take anything else but good brotherly delight in Father God liking something of Abel's better than Cain's, or vice versa. Way to go, little bro. Science fair parable number 2. Without the knowledge of good and evil in the works, the savage and reprehensible act of burning an animal to death as a sacrifice to God, the very catalyst of Abel's demise, never happens. How do we know that for sure? That burnt offerings would have never been concocted? Because within our unspoiled factory setting, no human being would need an organized reason to cut an animal's throat wide open just to watch it bleed and burn on an altar, all under the twisted belief that God would find this to be good. Do you understand the significance of this lesson? This lesson comes to us directly from our Father in heaven. He has blessed us with this lesson. We should thank him for this very important view from the outside of our prison looking in. For indeed, we are imprisoned by the knowledge of good and evil. We are perpetually imprisoned by it. As the decades go on, it only gets worse. Despite all of our human advancements, still the willful act of a man killing his fellow man is alive and well in the 21st century, all courtesy of the knowledge of good and evil. And that's a fact. There are only 3 reasons a human being purposefully kills another human being. 1, the perpetrator judges the victim as evil. 2, the perpetrator judges it good to kill the victim. Or 3, a combination of the first 2 judgments. That is what leads to sin. Judgment, piss poor judgment, judgment based upon our knowledge, our awareness of the concept of good and evil. Without the knowledge of good and evil, there would have never been the first burnt offering, the first murder, the first war, the first theft, the first lie, the first genocide, nor the first crowded airliner flown purposefully into a crowded building. Do you know where you are? I mean, really, what tangible universe are you living in? Go ahead and shout it out if you truly know. You really don't know, do you? Well, I'll be happy to tell you. You are in God's very good, tangible creation. Evil is created, imagined within us out of absolutely nothing. As Jesus perfectly assesses, out of the Gospel of Mark, chapter 7, verse 20, the Living Bible, quote, "It is the thought life that pollutes," unquote. All it takes is a conscience and an imagination. Actually, all it takes is an imagination. For we grow conscience out of imagination. We define what sin is more than for ourselves. We define it for God. Carl, a mature Christian and Presbyterian minister, takes issue. How can you say we define what sin is for God when it's God who gave us the 10 Commandments? Because by breaking them, we redefine each and every one of them as sin. It's always man defining what is and what is not sin. This truth is inescapable. Listed as one of the 7 deadly sins, lust is a great example of man's lackadaisical characterization of what is and what is not sin. Only 1 out of every 12,000 people commit homicide, yet lust is the deadly sin that plagues nearly every mature Christian conscience. Not a one of the 10 Commandments has anything to do with lust, sexual desire. Yet ever since day one, Judge Fleming has exacerbated man's already destructive idea of sin by adding sexual sin into the equation. Henceforth it be adjudicated, Any kind of sex outside of Judge Fleming's guidelines for having sex is a sin. In actuality, the living God never said that having sex with thine own self, autoeroticism, nor that sex between two or more consenting adults is a no-no. Biblical fact, adultery is not sexual sin. Rather, it is theft of property sin. Church-taught Christian Bible makers inject the word lust into Jesus' slam on the Pharisees. Quote, anyone who even looks at a betrothed or married woman with epitomese has already committed adultery with her, unquote. The Greek word epitomese means to covet or to want, same as the jewel thief looks at a diamond necklace and covets it or wants it. Adultery has nothing to do with sexual desire, lust. Adultery has everything to do with wanting something that belongs to somebody else. Judge Fleming has done his worst to convince people that sexual desire and sex itself, in all its church-taught, unauthorized forms, is sin. Sexual desire and sex itself is allowed only for a man and a woman so long as they have at some point stood before a holy man and had magic words spoken upon them. This within itself is the most revealing thing about sin. We can define it any way we would like. It is the church taught, not God, who defines sex outside of marriage as sin. So says the Bible. Under Old Testament Mosaic law, sex outside of marriage was not considered a sin. Exodus chapter 22, verses 16 and 17 out of the NKJV, quote, if a man entices a virgin who is not betrothed, in other words, not engaged, and lies with her, he shall surely pay the bride price for her to be his wife. If her father utterly refuses to give her to him, he shall pay money according to the bride price of virgins, unquote. The adjudication above has absolutely nothing to do with lust nor sexual sin. It has to do with property. And guess what? The woman is the property. The sin of adultery occurs only if the woman involved is already the property of a husband. By Old Testament standards, there is no sin associated with a man having premarital sex with a virgin damsel. If kept discreet, there's no problem with it whatsoever. Should the parties involved be found out, it simply turns into a business matter, because the woman is still what? Her father's property. The man must pay cash, the bride price, to the woman's father for devaluing his daughter's worth by taking her virginity, and then agree to marry her should the father permit it. The woman has no final say in the matter, even if she was raped by the man. Deuteronomy chapter 22, verses 28 through 29 out of the KJV, quote, if a man finds a damsel that is a virgin, which is not betrothed, and he lay hold on her and lie with her, and they be found, then the man that lay with her shall give unto the damsel's father 50 shekels of silver, and she shall be his wife, because he has humbled her. He may not put her away, in other words, not be permitted to divorce her, all his days, unquote. So says the Bible. Nice for the woman, right? She gets to marry her rapist. She gets to cook meals all the rest of her life for her rapist. She gets to bear and raise the children of her rapist. Consider the rest of the 10 Commandments and the wiggle room godly men and events around them. Godly men define why it's not a sin to break any one of the 10 Commandments. It's okay for us to covet our neighbor's goods as long as our desires promote healthy ambition. Check that out in Joshua chapter 11, verses 14 through 23. It's okay to lie as long as there's a greater prize, plan, or principle to be gained, as in loose lips sink ships. You find that in Genesis chapter 12, verses 11 through 13. Capital felony armed robbery, arson, cold-blooded murder, kidnapping, and rape? No problem. It's all good. It's okay to loot and pillage every home in the countryside and slaughter everyone until the women and children are all that's left. Then you must kill all the male children, yes, living children, What about the living girls? Well, you may kidnap all the virgin females from babies on up to do with as you please. Sure, rape them to your heart's content. Why not, say the men? Since we rule over women, we may always do as we please with them. You can find all that in Numbers chapter 31, verses 7 through 18. It's okay to steal as long as we believe we have the good right to do so. You find that in Joshua chapter 8, verses 1 and 2. The Israelites killed the Hittites who stole the land from the Amorites. Then the Israelites stole the rest of the land from the Amorites after doing what? Killing them. Judeo-Christian approved loophole. It's called the Promised Land. Same with the United States. We killed the British, who stole the land from the Native Americans. Then we stole the rest of the land from the Native Americans after doing what? Killing them. Christian-approved loophole. It's called Manifest Destiny. What? Thou shalt not kill? Nah, it's okay to kill. USA Christians will even stand up and applaud you as you take human life, as long as you do it while you're wearing your USA soldier suit. At a big Baptist church in Arnold, Missouri, there's an entire floor, the kids section no less, devoted to the Ten Commandments. The church version of the Ten Commandments are written on the hallway walls for the kiddies to see and learn. Ladies and gents and all other distinguished persons, behold the greater good, justification in full motion. Get this. To make sure that all the children know it's okay to kill your fellow man as long as you have a good reason for doing so, thou shalt not kill has been changed to, quote, thou shalt not murder, unquote. Christian or non-Christian, we humankind define what sin is. If you truly accept that smoking is a sin, then it is one. For you it is. If you truly accept that getting a blood transfusion is a sin, then it is one. For you it is. Entirely psychological. We chose having the knowledge of good and evil over our factory setting. We chose sickness over health. We chose death over life. Our own ignorant choice. Our own stupid choice. Our own careless choice. Yet there's good news. We still have a choice. The cure for all of what ails us is indeed a valid choice, a simple choice. It's harvest time. Please, let's free our heads of every stumbling block that stands in the way of perfect grace. It's as simple as yanking weeds out of a garden, with one nice exception. You only have to yank them out once. Yank a tear out of your mind, and trust me, it stays out. Free your mind, and all good will follow. Take all the ifs, ands, and buts to the curb. No ifs, meaning no hypothetical conditions. No ands, meaning no add-ons. No buts, meaning no diminishments. In its pure form, the gift Jesus left for us is a psychological slam dunk. Jesus calls it baptismo mentaneo, a totally immersed change of mind. What say we trash all the tares and fill up our silos with wheat? Out with the diabolical prime directive, good and evil. Back to our God-given prime directive. It's all good. We have evil here in God's creation because we used our power, our brain power, to bring it here. Likewise, we have the same God-given power to send it away. How? The Jesus concept amplifies us with thermonuclear power. How? By changing our psychology, our way of thinking, one person at a time, back to our factory setting. Roland, a Baptist pastor, inquires, are you suggesting that we lose our mature adulthood? All that we know? We should become morons? We are morons. We take semi-automatic weapons, march into places where people are gathered, and kill as many people as we possibly can. Why? Because people are evil, and so it's good to exterminate them. We march into grade schools and kill little kids. Why? Because they will grow up to be evil, and so it's good to exterminate them. We have already had 2 world wars and we are moronically marching onward toward our third. Adulthood. Adam and Eve were adult, only they did not think in the hood. You want to be a respectable adult in creation? If so, respect the original mindset the living God blessed upon each and every one of us in the very beginning. Our prime directive, it's all good. Now that is wisdom. That is what the prophets are saying when they advise us to, quote, fear the Lord, unquote. Had Isaiah and Ezekiel straight up taught humanity, everyone needs to dismiss the entire notion of evil, their Neanderthal contemporaries would have instantly stoned them to death. And just the opposite. Each generation is taught by the previous generation to fully embrace the notion of evil. What should be the universal goal of today's generation? Grab a stronghold on the handle Jesus left for us. Cancel the and evil notion of our good and evil way of thinking. Impossible? Well, once you truly embrace the what's been done for us on the cross headset, it becomes impossible for you as a true acceptor to do anything truly evil, murder, telling a hurtful lie, hating folks, etc. Should what's been done for us on the cross go viral, these things will truly become obsolete in our reconsidered, reevaluated way of thinking across the world. Evil will exist only in the context of the surreal or the historical. Movies, plays, storybooks, and museums. Whoa, how can that really be possible? Because evil thrives on being consequential. The God's honest truth, it is ingrained within our human nature to be entirely done with things that are truly and entirely inconsequential. Granted, such a thing takes time, however, a lot less time than one would imagine. 60 years ago in 1966 AD, we would have thought it was absolutely impossible to live in a world without phone booths. Even in the year 2000 AD, we still had over 2 million of them scattered throughout the United States. 18 years later, in 2018 AD, we had less than 100,000 of them. Now, proportionately, that's going from 100 to 5 in 18 years. In 2066 AD, the only place you'll be able to find a phone booth is in a museum. Much less consequential than a phone booth, evil is old, useless, counterproductive, and of no value to anyone whatsoever. For a generation that likes to cancel things, the notion of evil is the most profitable thing for any generation to cancel. Do you agree? When Jesus more than agrees, he left us the foolproof way to cancel this terrible aberration. Foolproof and simple. Send it away. Now that is true wisdom, and that is true understanding. Job chapter 28, verse 28, out of the KJV, quote, and unto man he said, quote, behold, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom, and to depart from evil is understanding, unquote. To truly accept what's been done for us on the cross is to depart from evil. To depart from evil is to restart your factory setting. It's all good. The cure for any pandemic is, quote, herd immunity, unquote. One restarted factory setting leads to two. Two leads to few. Few leads to many. And many leads to all. Of course, this is absolutely revolutionary. Well, the Jesus concept is absolutely revolutionary. Can we even comprehend the big picture? What the Jesus concept is really all about? To restart humanity's factory setting is to reclaim the kingdom of heaven here on planet Earth.